Good evening, everyone. I'd like to welcome you to the Williamson County School Board meeting. We're going to go ahead and call the meeting to order.
There are 11 members present.
Check, check. Okay, here we go. Next item on the agenda is the Pledge of Allegiance, followed by a moment of silence. And tonight, our school board member, Jen Apria, is going to lead us in both.
Put your right hand over your heart. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. You may be seated. Okay, the first item on our agenda is items of particular public interest, and this is the time of the evening where we get to hear from members of the public who have signed up to come and speak with us. Tonight we have 11 individuals, and Lydia, is it 2 minutes and 45 seconds? 2 minutes and 45 seconds. Okay. All right, so only cut 15 seconds off the 3 minutes. So, but everybody, you can see your time up here on the monitor, so just follow along, and we'll have to give you the cut if we get too far over that 2 minutes and 45 seconds. So I apologize in advance. But the first two guests are Bill Petty and Noah Craig. And Noah, you can just hang out until Mr. Petty is done, and I'll call the next individual up after.
Good evening. I'm Bill Petty. I've been here a few times. It's nice to see you all tonight. You're all looking well. And I sat through the laborious Thursday night work section. I think, you know, if I was a board member, I would just dread those hours there. But a lot of work is done. You guys make a lot of decisions. I really do appreciate the time that you spend doing that. It's not easy, so I realize that. The thing I want to talk about tonight is, we got issued, I know it's not on the agenda, but Title IX. And I'm sure everybody's heard today that a preliminary injunction was filed. It's going to put a stop to that for the time being, and it includes the state of Tennessee. So this was supposed to go into effect August 1st, but I think that's substantially changed now, if I understand correctly. I see people nodding. I've been accused of not knowing anything about the law, and I shouldn't be talking about it, so I have to be really careful. But when I get a nod from an attorney, I say, okay, I must be on the right track. So I want to talk about that a little bit, because over the last 4 or 5 years, we've seen an explosion of transgender in young people. And all of the medical associations have gone along with it. And they've gone along with a thing called WPATH, which is a treatment of care program that's been around since 1978. And finally, there is a major medical organization that's come out and said, no, this is wrong. And it is the American College of Pediatricians. And I want to read what they have to say here. And first of all, I want to make it really clear about whether or not a human being can switch from one sex to another. Scientifically, that is impossible. Every somatic cell in your body has either XX or XY chromosomes, period. That's science. But this is what they have to say. These are doctors, these are research people, these are scientists, these are people that are treating young people, and this is what they say. Therefore, given the recent research and revelations of the harmful approach advocated by WPATH and its followers in the United States, we, the undersigned, call upon the medical professional organization of the United States, including the American Academy of Pediatrics, the Endocrine Society, the Pediatric Endocrine Society, American Medical Association, the American Psychological Association, and the American Academy of Child and Adolescent Psychology to follow the science and their European professional colleagues and immediately stop the promotion of social affirmation, puberty blockers, cross-sex hormones, and surgeries for children and adolescents who experience distress over their biological sex.
Mr. Petty.
Instead, these organizations should
Mr. Petty.
recommend comprehensive evaluations and therapies.
Mr. Petty, I'm sorry.
Did I-
We do have
did
to
I
call
finish?
time. No, we do have
Okay,
to call
well,
time.
you got the
Sorry.
point.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you
Mr.
for
Petty.
marking my time. I appreciate that.
And I do want to pause 1 second because I neglected to turn over the floor to Mr. Golden. He did have an announcement he was going to make, actually, about.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair. We had actually talked, and an order did come down from the U.S. District Court from the Eastern District of Kentucky that our attorney shared with us. We mentioned at the work session that the state of Tennessee and some other states did challenge the proposed regulations from the U.S. Department of Education, and those regulations that were scheduled to go into effect on August 1st were enjoined by that court. It does apply to Tennessee. And our attorneys and we are going to read the detail of that order, but I do want to mention a couple of lines from it. In the conclusion, the U.S. District Court does say at bottom the department, that meaning that the U.S. Department of Education, would turn Title IX on its head by redefining sex to include gender identity, but sex and gender identity do not mean the same thing. So as a result, the proposed regulations are not at this time applicable to us.
Right.
So we'll continue.
Is your microphone on?
I can't hear very well.
So I don't know that, Tim? Okay. So that district court decision was issued this morning, and those proposed Title IX regulations from the U.S. Department of Education are not currently applicable to us because that district court did enjoin application of those. So we will continue with our existing policy that is in our policy manual related to Title IX.
Were you guys able to hear Mr. Golden? No? Okay. So,
Am I correct, Tim? Is this microphone on? Okay.
You might have to.
yeah.
All right, I'm going to say it a third. Now it's on.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. Maybe it's not responsive. The U.S. District Court for the Eastern District of Kentucky did make a decision and released it this morning that enjoined the U.S. Department of Education's regulations related to Title IX that were scheduled to go into effect on August 1st. So we are currently under our existing Title IX policy, which you can find in our handbook and in our board policy manual. And as a result of that decision, we are not going to be required as of August 1st to implement those proposed regulations. We've talked to our attorneys. We're going to make sure that we understand all the details of that. And I can't speak for the attorneys with a schedule, but I did read a piece of that order. Certainly encourage folks to go out and read that order.
Thank you, Mr. Golden.
Madam Chair,
Yes, sir.
please remind the audience to give other speakers courtesy and to not yell out. This is a business meeting.
Yeah.
They conduct themselves.
Thank you. Yeah.
Or else they can leave.
Yeah, Mr. Welch makes a good point. So this is a business meeting, and we do invite members of the public to come and speak at the microphone. So if we could reserve comments and call-outs, that would be really good to allow the speakers to be heard. And I know it's, we like to clap, et cetera, when we hear things that we agree with, but if we could reserve that as well, we do want to keep this business meeting moving along. Okay, thank you, Mr. Welch. Our next guest is Noah Craig, and followed by Genevieve Pejos.
Good evening, and thank you, board members and other Williamson County leaders. My name is Noah Krieg. I'm here independently representing my family, and thank you for the announcement of regarding the Title IX issue. Very pleased to hear that. Again, I represent my family. I have 4 kids in the Williamson County school system, 3 girls and a boy, across 3 different schools. Walnut Grove, Grassland Middle, and then my oldest going into Franklin High. So I do appreciate your hard work as a school board on all the issues involved, and I want to express my appreciation. Regarding Title IX changes, this is something, of course, that there's been a recent decision on, and I appreciate Dr. Golden's update on that. But of course, because of the cultural forces, I'm sure this is going to be an issue going forward as well. And I just wanted to express my personal opinion on this. Apart from all the legal aspects, the cultural forces, and so forth, I think that this thing, to me as a father, really boils down to having schools where children can feel safe and then also feel fair, especially in sports programs that this touches directly on. You know, there's a lot of things at work politically. I don't know how this became a political issue, but I'm sure there's a lot of pressure on our school board to kind of try to make progress on this, to avoid being labeled this or that, maybe hateful or even on the wrong side of history. After speaking on a platform like this tonight, I fully expect also to be labeled some kind of extremist or bigot, possibly. Who cares? To me, again, this boils down as a father for, do I feel safe to send my girls to a school where there may be changes in the current Title IX program or regulations, and then also into a sports program where it may not be fair for them going forward. So I appreciate your consideration on these issues, and thank you for giving the opportunity for members of the county to come speak tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Genevieve Pejos, followed by Izzy Rose. And thank you for holding your applause. It was pleasant. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Genevieve. I have a daughter that attends public high school in Williamson County, and I'm here for a very simple reason today, which you guys talked about, and it's adding a little bit of confusion to me, honestly, with the recent ruling. But the simple reason I am here is biological boys do not belong in locker rooms, bathrooms, and on the sports field with females. Period. It's very simple. This used to be common sense. I can't even honestly believe that I have to come up here and say that because I want to be able to send my daughter to school and know that she's going to go in the bathroom and I don't have to worry about it. And for everybody who says, oh, it's all safe, it's not a big deal to allow boys in girls' rooms, all you have to do is look at Loudoun County and look at what happened to the female student there. It's not a safe or a good thing to do. Now, there seems, again, this confusion over the policy. So the attorney for the school board said that even with the changes in Title IX, that it would not affect sports, bathroom, locker room, and kids' speeches, but attorney generals throughout the country, including Tennessee, disagree with that. So what I was coming here to ask for, which I think we're going to need anyway, is either a resolution or a policy. I'm honestly not sure which is needed, just stating that students can only go into the bathroom, locker room, and play on a sports team that aligns with their biological sex. Simple, easy, and common sense, and I'm confident that is what the majority of Williamson County parents and citizens want. So that's it. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Next, we have Izzy Rose, followed by Gray Rose.
Hello again. My name is Izzy Rose, and I was here at this podium about 2 months ago discussing the many reasons why our WCS arts teachers deserve a raise. The last time I was here, you guys made it seem like you were willing to talk through this and make a change, but that was simply not the case, for no changes were made. There was some hopeful chatter that this could get addressed, but I realized that has not yet happened. The intentions of saying you are going to do something and actually doing it are two different things. There are still major differences in the pay that our own arts teachers make when compared to other paid after-school positions. I was recently in a middle school production that involved my rehearsal time alone being close to 100 hours. The fine arts teachers that made it happen put in so much more time than me, nearly 400 hours to be exact. I noticed that Mr. Wimberly attended a recent high school thespian club fundraiser just this past weekend. He was talking to some of the fine arts teachers. I am grateful that he took the time to speak with them and make these connections. These are professional teachers and they deserve professional pay. If you don't pay them enough for their hard work, you risk losing such dedicated teachers. Again, why does the leader of my preferred after-school activity make so much less than any other after-school program? Why do the arts teachers continue to get paid so much less than the coaches for their after-school time. Still, the arts teachers get a set amount that does not increase year after year. Coaches and assistant coaches get an amount that does increase year after year because it is a percentage of their salary instead of a set stipend. I want to make it clear that coaches do not deserve to be paid less, but the fine arts teachers deserve to be paid more. This is inadequate and must be addressed by you, our school board members, once again. Our district vision statement says WCS will provide a supportive environment where students are challenged to pursue excellence in academics, athletics, and the arts. We have the excellent teachers and staff to inspire us, but please, let's make sure the leaders of my preferred after-school activities are paid in the same way that coaches are paid. Why offer them anything less? I understand that this needs to be negotiated with the WCEA. We'll get that meeting on the calendar because it needs to happen. WCS knows better and needs to do better. Williamson County, you get what you pay for, and it is simply unacceptable that we have had to stand up for this again. And this is my second time speaking here about the same topic. And I will continue to return until these changes are made. I'm willing to do whatever it takes if that means speaking at every board meeting from here on out, so be it. Hopefully, I will not have to see you guys again in 2 months, and if I do, it will be on a different subject. Thank you for any attempt you can make to rectify this discrepancy in pay.
Thank you. Next, we have Gray Rose, followed by Spencer List.
Hello, I'm Gray Rose, and I was here 2 months ago to talk about the unequal pay for the arts teachers. That was 2 months ago, and nothing has changed. These including, kind, and loving teachers deserve the same amount of money as sports coaches. I encourage you to do something about this issue before we lose great teachers. If we are going to do something, we have to do it now, because we don't want to lose great art teachers to this unequal pay. Also, as a kid, I am not weirded out by other gender kids being in the bathroom with me. So if I'm not weirded out, I feel like the parents shouldn't be weirded out. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Spencer List, followed by Ravita Rockman.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for your time. I'm a recent graduate of Williamson County High School, and I just wanted to talk about Title IX for a second. I'm sure we all understand that the new expansions under Title IX help to ensure the protection of children from sexual harassment. But what we're forgetting is that this is not only protecting the students, but the countless number of LGBTQ+ teachers within our district, teachers that put so much effort into providing a quality education for us. These teachers do not deserve to be subjected to harassment based on stereotypes, sexual orientation, or gender identity. Let's not forget that the purpose of this law is to protect our children and friends, especially female students, from sexual assault. Regardless of what you feel about LGBTQ+ people, it is reprehensible to reject such a large lump sum of federal funding with the express intent of denying protections to human beings. Nobody deserves to be harassed, belittled, or distracted from their purpose in the school building. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Next, we have Ravita Rockman, followed by Heather Thomas.
Hello. The WCS bullying numbers are consistent with last year, too many. The data shows that only 243 racial bullying cases were verified out of 1,111 reported bullying incidents this past school year. According to Pacer.org, only 20% of bullying cases are even reported. That means our actual bullying numbers are higher. Many students of color have expressed to us they don't feel the need to report anything because of the perception that nothing will be done. And now we have a documented reality that many of their reports will be left unresolved. We've had families report how a teacher became included in a bullying issue rather than standing as a trusted adult. Are there trainings that staff will complete as trusted adults to help victims? WCS has worked on fair and consistent consequences by adjusting the code of conduct. We are happy with that review, but recognize interpretation has varied from school to school. We can't continue to do the same thing and expect a different result. So I ask, before the students return, what measures are we taking to change this data point and decrease racial bullying in WCS? How do we let students know that they're valued and listened to? A few suggestions are incorporated in modules to encourage students to be upstanders instead of bystanders. Can modeling inclusive behaviors be an answer? Are there supports for students who are bullied regularly? Are there any efforts to monitor the hot spots where most of these incidents take place, which lack adult supervision? These are just a few of the anti-bullying strategies that could be incorporated. While many of you school board members won't be returning in the fall, I want to express our thanks to you for your service. And for those trying to get your jobs, we ask them to continue to help create environments that encourage student safety and support for every student. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Heather Thomas, followed by Jenny Caparos.
I'm a Wilco resident. My children and myself attended Williamson County Schools, and my mother worked as an elementary teacher for 30-plus years. I'm asking you to please rely on facts and not misinformation. Fact, being trans is not a choice, nor anything anyone could possibly be indoctrinated into or any parent would desire for their children. The fact is, there are 3 issues that many times get intermingled. 1 is sex. Sex is the parts that you were born with at birth. 2 is gender, the way that you feel inside. For instance, I was born female and I identify as a woman. 3, for some people, biologically, things simply do not match one another. These people are non-binary and transgender. Trans kids are not a threat to anyone. They're filled with anxiety, particularly in a restroom. Statistically, trans folks are much higher risk of being bullied and physically abused than their peers. These kids have much higher bladder and kidney issues because many of them are too afraid to use the restroom and hold it all day. My own son did this and now has bladder problems at the age of 25. Who cares who's in the stall next to you? In many other parts of the world, restrooms are gender neutral. Access to restrooms in sports are supported with perfectly valid factual information. In sports, if children have not gone through puberty or have already transitioned with hormones for over a year, they do not have an advantage in athletics other than perhaps their height or weight, which plenty of girls possess those characteristics. I'm going to quote my alma mater, Brentwood High School Athletic Department's mission statement: to create a positive educational environment that changes students to improve team building, prepare for lifelong learning, teach technique, but also foster relationships, the value of work ethic, fairness, discipline, self-motivation, goal setting that will stick with them for a lifetime. 12 years ago, our family went through the hardest time of our lives. The sole reason was because our child was physically, sexually, and emotionally abused at school by countless bullies. Instead of holding them responsible, my child was the one who suffered the consequences of their behavior. His academic performance crashed, his confidence was killed, his mental health was and still is filled with PTSD and trauma. My child and others like him should have had the ability to be cared for, treated kindly, and with empathy for what they were going through is confusing and difficult enough without external factors. Finally, had the administration of my children's middle school treated sports as a privilege and a responsibility of representing his school, those kids would have been suspended for games, gone to a different school, and their parents would have been alerted that they were bullying. My child would have had continued to have a sports that he loved, to be able to be a goal-oriented competitor that he was once, had he been taken care of and treated safely. Remember, your mission as educators is not about winning in scholarships, but about all children.
Thank you. Next, we have Jenny Caparos, followed by Josh Scott.
Good evening. My name is Jenny Caparos, and I live in Brentwood with my husband and 4 children. I'm standing here today to speak about possible changes to Title IX and how that will affect Williamson County schools, and more specifically, how that will affect girls' sports in Williamson County. It is my belief these changes will harm our girls and make things less equal on the fields and in the locker rooms. Here are some points to ponder. Number 1, these changes in Title IX violate the right to bodily privacy. Students have a constitutional right not to be seen undressed by students of the opposite sex. Number 2, male athletes have clear biological advantages over female athletes, such as taller body height, more lean body mass, more muscle mass, greater muscle strength, and larger hearts and lungs. Number 3, allowing males to compete with females is not safe. Last school year in Massachusetts, a female field hockey player suffered significant facial and dental injuries resulting in hospitalization when hit in the face by a male playing on the opposing team. In North Carolina, a female volleyball player suffered head and neck injuries and a long-term concussion after being spiked in the head by a male playing on the opposing team. These are just 2 of many examples. Ironically, today is 4 years to the day that my husband and I moved our family to Tennessee. We left Illinois in part because our once family-friendly suburb of Chicago had become a cesspool of woke ideology that was seeping into public schools. I'm hoping and praying the same thing does not happen here. I'm standing here today fighting for right over wrong, truth over lies, science over fiction, and good over evil. What are you here for? Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Next, we have Josh Scott, followed by Sarah Landing.
Hey, thanks for letting me be here. My name is Josh Scott. I'm the lead pastor of Grace Point Church in Nashville, and I'm here speaking because whatever happens with Title IX is going to impact students who are part of our faith community, and it matters to us. One of the things I've become convinced of in my life is that the one thing we all share in common, maybe besides needing air, the other thing we share in common is we all really want to belong. It is built and woven into us as a species to want to belong, to want to have safety, to want to feel like we have a community. We want to take up the space that God made us to take up. We want to bear God's image in the way God created us to bear God's image. And that is all trans kids are asking for, to take up the space God made them to take up in the world and to bear God's image in the way God created them to bear God's image in the world. Thank you.
Thank you. Our final speaker is Sarah Landing.
This is a bit of a shift. My name is Sarah Landing, and I'm a resident of Williamson County, Miss Apria's district to be exact. And I'm a parent and a teacher. Thanks. In Williamson County Schools, I like to call this the sweet trifecta. I'm actually here tonight to say thank you to all of you, to members of the school board and to our central office employees who have done so much work on the 24-25 budget. First and foremost, I appreciate you prioritizing the 6% across the board raise. I fully believe that all WCS employees deserve that. So thank you for preserving that in this new budget. At the same time, I will say that I am a bit disappointed, albeit not surprised, that the majority of the work and concessions on the budget gap were made by Williamson County Schools. I am guessing that you all made the proposed changes to the budget because, like me, you suspected that the commission would not ultimately fund anything over the original allotted amount. I am grateful to Mayor Anderson for proposing forgiving the $1.14 million loan payment to help with the budget gap, but I am disheartened that the county commission wasn't willing to do more on their end. I am still concerned about the cuts that have been made, but still I believe that you all did the best that you could with what you had to work with. What I really want to say to you and to our community as a whole is this. This was and is about more than just a raise. It seems to me that the raise is likely to happen, but I am still here tonight because for me, this is about value. At the end of the day, we spend our time and our finances on the things that we value. Every commissioner and school board candidate I've spoken with has assured me they value our schools and our teachers, but words without action is meaningless. But back to you. If there is one thing I know, it is that public service, whether it's working directly in public education, serving on a local school board, or even holding a commission seat, it is often thankless. We seem to be the targets of constant criticism, some of which can be rather nasty. My principal recently reminded me of Teddy Roosevelt's man in the arena metaphor. He begins with, "It is not the critic who counts. The credit belongs to the man who is actually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood, who strives valiantly, who errs, who comes short again and again, because there is no effort without error and shortcoming, but who does actually strive to do the deeds, who knows great enthusiasms, the great devotions, who spends himself in a worthy cause, who at the best knows in the end the triumph of high achievement, and who at the worst, if he fails while daring greatly." We all have plenty of critics, but it is you and I and my colleagues who are actually in the arena fighting for public education every day. None of us is perfect, but we are fighting for a worthy cause. So thank you for all you do. It is my hope that one day this county will also show that it values this work. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you to everyone for coming tonight, and thank you so much for your polite holding of applause. That was really pleasant to be able to hear everybody fully and completely. And I do want to acknowledge, too, before I move on, Deputies Mark Gorman and Phil Hunt. Thank you both so much for being here with us tonight. This concludes our public comment section of the agenda. So thank you guys so much for being here. Our next item on the agenda is the superintendent contract review and extension. This is an annual agenda item that must be addressed at the beginning of our agenda. So we will start here, and I'm going to open the floor I'm going to open the floor for a motion. Mr. Welch, thank you. Do we have a second? Mr. Brown, thank you. We'll now open the floor for some comment and discussion if necessary. Okay, looks like no comment. Oh, Ms. Clemens, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I know that we had talked about this some at the work session, and there's a couple things that I'd like to see on this that are not on here. One thing is the current salary. Is it still not?
It's just real light, so if you want to lean forward into it.
Get really close up here. There's a couple things I'd like to see on the contract. I'd like to see the current salary, because we're way off, about, I think, $60,000 off. And I realized this was coming right up after the comment, so I was trying to get this together. But it looks like we've had 5 addendums added to this. And to me, I think there's something that's important about having someone get close to their contract versus just keep pushing it down the road. So these are some areas where I'd like to see this changed on this, but especially the current salary I feel like needs to be on there.
Okay, are you making comments, or did you want to propose a revision or amendment to the contract?
I would be open to an amendment for that if anybody would be interested. I thought there would be more conversation on this before it went forward, so I jumped in to see if there's any other comments.
Mr. Brown?
Jason, it might be helpful to give context to the period of time in which these addendums and extensions have been done, and maybe that would help illustrate a little more about why we're doing this tonight, the way we're doing it, and then maybe that would inform, further discussion.
Sure. So when the school board first made the offer to me a little bit over 5 years ago, the draft contract included a four-year term, which is actually the max that the state allows. As part of that, it had a maximum 2-year buyout if the board unilaterally terminated my contract without cause. We're struggling again. There's something about the microphones tonight. Yeah, and maybe continue to project our voice the entire time while we're speaking. So the contract included the maximum 4 years that the state allowed for a superintendent's contract, with a provision for a 2-year maximum buyout in the event the school board unilaterally terminated my contract without cause. Part of the discussion we had was not through the contract, but through the discussion of our annual agenda, having my evaluation, which is required by state law, and also potentially the discussion of extending that contract at the end of each year from a 3-year window to a 4-year window. To this point, we've done it. I've had some thoughts here and there, mixed thoughts about that from year to year, wondering what's the appropriate time. As we sit here today, if you all make that offer to extend it, I will accept that. No other provision would change based on what's currently on the floor. So that would be that window of time with, of course, that potential 2-year buyout. So nothing would change there if this passed. On the pay side, I don't remember the exact numbers, but I think my pay started at $279,000, and there's a provision in my contract that includes that I would get a pay raise that other staff members got. And actually, in preparation for the discussion about our budget, I had actually printed this out. I started in 2019. In 2020, we did not get a pay raise. And some of our teachers did get a role based on their experience, but no one else got a pay increase that year. In 2021, we did a 4% pay increase on July 1st, and then effective January 31st of 2022, we did a 3% increase based on available funds, largely through sales tax. I don't know if you all remember some of that detail at the time. And then in 2023, we did a 2% for staff that included me, but the teacher chart had major increases, along with a classified chart moved on as well. I take that back. There was also a $1 per hour increase for our hourly staff back in January of 22 as well. And then last year we did a 6% pay increase. And so as a result of that, I have gotten those pay increases, the 0%, the 4%, then 3% halfway through the 21-22 school year, and then the 2% in 23, and then the 6% just last year.
Thank you, Mr. Golden. Mr. Brown, did that conclude your comments? Okay. Mr. Galbraith?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So, Jason, I know we talked about that. I just wanted to, I guess we've got the annual agenda coming up, and we've talked a little bit about the timing of when these happen. So, would you? And it's a lot easier to talk about this kind of in advance of us kind of bringing this up on the annual agenda. But if having reflected on it, would you be open to kind of changing the annual agenda to doing this increase every 2 years? I've always felt like it's a little weird. Like, I mean, even just related to coaching salaries and coaching hires, to do an extension every year always just seems a little odd to me. It's kind of the only kind of a really unique situation. Of course, the superintendent's kind of a unique position, reporting to an elected board. But just would you be open to that? Have you just?
Yes, I would be open to that. Tonight, I am asking for that 1-year extension with the discussion later on about doing it every 2 years. And we've had some discussions about what does it mean for there to be a 1-year contract extension in any particular year. If a board votes not to extend the contract and there's 3 years on a contract, I'd be asking questions about individual board members. What does that mean? And so, especially with my leadership of our team and the work we do in the community, I think it's important for that, for when it comes before the board, for you all to make it clear your view of it. And so, as we sit here tonight, I do think for our team, the best thing is to approve that. But we do speak annually about the annual agenda. And I think there may be some wisdom in discussing that long term.
That's fair. And just I'm not saying we don't, but I'm going to vote for the extension today. I wasn't trying to make that on the agenda tonight, but just I wanted to kind of think about it for the future. Thanks.
Thank you. Mr. Cash?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm not sure if this is where we're talking about the actual superintendent evaluation, or this is the contract. Okay, I'll save mine for later. Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Ha?
Thank you, Madam Chair. One thing I would say about the extension and the fact that doesn't seem typical, maybe in other lines of business, is that it is very typical for superintendents, and that's what we need to keep in mind, is that we are in one of over 100 districts in the state, and we are a very desirable district with an award-winning superintendent. And I recall that the salary was bumped up as a result of some of that those efforts to attract our superintendent at the time. So any tweak that dials back the contract or pulls back in any way is a concern to the district and may have a concerning effect on the assistant superintendents or the teachers or the other staff in the district. So the commitment to the superintendent is stated by extending it a year in accordance with a very positive evaluation as well. But I think it is like that with, it's a vote of confidence, but I think the more tangible part is that buyout. I mean, that's the executable part of the contract anyhow, but that extension of a year is really a message to the district and to the people that we serve that we have faith in the leadership here and we want to have some continuity and peace of mind that that will continue.
Thank you, Mr. Hall. Mr. Brown?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just had one more thought about the salary based on Ms. Clement's comments earlier. I mean, it's fully reasonable to be transparent about what your salary is. I mean, I don't think anyone objects to that. Is it something that we could consider just stating tonight what the new salary would be based on this going forward year? Get that on record versus making that part of the actual contract addendum itself? I'm just throwing that out for discussion.
If I'm not mistaken, Ms. Farmer, my salary currently is $329,000. So
that's before the 6% raise that's pending?
Yep,
or?
that's the current salary. That's right.
Okay. So the new salary would be roughly 350?
340 something probably.
348.
348.
Okay. Thank you, board members, for discussion. Do we have any further discussion before we move to a vote? Okay. We are ready to proceed with our votes.
The vote is 10 yes, 1 no.
Okay, thank you. Motion did pass to extend Mr. Golden's contract for an additional year. Next item on the agenda is to approve our agenda. Do we have a motion? Thank you, Mr. Welch. And a second? Mr. Wimberly, thank you. We'll open the floor for any discussion about the agenda itself. If no discussion, we can move to our votes.
The vote is 11 yes, 0 no.
Thank you. Motion did pass to approve the agenda, but Mr. Cash, yes. Okay. Okay, got you.
And I'd like to clarify that and change that.
Okay, so Mr. Cash is going on record to state that he intended to click no on the item number 3, contract review and extension. Can we have that reflected in the minutes?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Cash. That's updated to be reflected in the minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay, next item on the agenda is the approval of the consent agenda. Do we have a motion? Mr. Ha, thank you. And thank you, Ms. Clements, for a second. We'll open the floor for discussion on the consent agenda. Okay, no discussion. We'll move to vote.
The vote is 11 yes, 0 no.
Thank you. Motion was approved for the consent, to approve the consent agenda. Approval of the May 20th, 2024 school board meeting minutes was one item on the consent agenda. Approval of the E-Plan applications for fiscal year 2025 to include the ESEA grants, IDEA Part B, IDEA Preschool, and the Carl Perkins. And third item on the consent agenda was recommendation for field trip fee requests. Next item on our agenda is the communications to the board. We'll start with Mr. Golden.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, board members. Just as a quick reminder, there's actually a Tennessee state law that requires the superintendent's contract to be the first thing on the agenda. That's why it was there. Feels a bit awkward just because of the structure. I did want to mention a couple of items related to some of the public comment that you all received. First, I'm disappointed a couple of our students left. They've mentioned pay for their arts teachers. I want to give you a reminder, we've talked about this. We started going through the process a little bit after our budget year started this year to start gathering information in conjunction with Williamson County Education Association through our collaborative conferencing responsibilities to start gathering information on our arts and athletics teachers to prepare for the possibility of making some changes for next year. So it's encouraging to hear that our students have heard about some of that work. They may not know that they heard about that work through us initiating that process, but I very much appreciate those, especially those middle schoolers coming and talking about the value they receive from their arts teachers. For everyone else who spoke, I noticed a theme, and it's a theme that we've shared: safety, student safety. We know and we are committed to all our students being safe, and not just physically safe, but also have a sense of safety on a daily basis. And it's a work in progress. We talked a little bit, and you, Madam Chair, you asked me about that district court decision that came down earlier today that addressed some of the procedures that we spoke about at our work session and what we anticipated might be coming. But no matter what happens with those discussions, with those court cases, with what happens at the legislature, I want our folks to know that our commitment is that student safety. I appreciate the comments, giving us some specific thoughts about how to improve that student safety. Our team is constantly working on that. I encourage folks to go back and look at the discussion we had at our work session where we shared that data. We know that sharing that data publicly is important. We know that letting our students know on the front end of every school year about the expectations we have is important, and we know that following up on that is important. We're going to continue to talk with our students, continue to talk with our parents about that, and find ways to implement improvements in those in how we protect against, create a culture that does not allow and respond to bullying behaviors. It's a work in progress. I do want to specifically mention one particular piece of data that we talked about at the work session on Thursday night. We have seen that the majority of those issues happen in middle school, and that's been a focus point. You may remember that Dr. Webb and I spoke to that directly. That doesn't mean it doesn't happen everywhere else. We actually gave you the numbers for that as well. Community members, students, graduates, I encourage you to continue to talk about it. Continue to talk and come to us and share your experiences, not just here at this public meeting, but in one-to-one conversations. Give us your thoughts. You know, we set a standard this year, and it was reflected in a lot of the goals that I had to increase parent involvement in the decision-making process. We recognize that some of our decisions might slow down because we're getting parents involved earlier on in those processes. As an example, we did it with our bus plan, one of the goals that we had. We did it with our strategic plan, and we're going to continue to do that. So especially in the context of student safety, we encourage you all to continue that as well because it's going to be a focus of ours. You all may remember that about a month ago we had an art celebration. Tomorrow is our athletic celebration, our annual celebration. It's our Wilcos. I know many of you board members attended the art celebration. Certainly encourage you to attend the Wilcos that are scheduled for tomorrow night as well. Final item I want to mention: we are halfway through, a little bit more than halfway through now, our summer school program. We have about 1,600 students in our summer school program. The vast majority of them, those 1,600 students, all but 22 of them are attending because they want to. because they want to get that additional instruction. 22 of those are third graders who took TCAP for the first time and scored at a particular level where, as a condition of them advancing to fourth grade, they needed to take the summer school program and do tutoring the next year. There's another group who actually had a choice of doing tutoring or the summer school program to advance to fourth grade. But as I mentioned on Thursday, our legislature actually made a change this year after hearing from so many of us that ultimately, if students do elect through their parents to choose those interventions during the summer, they can advance to fourth grade, and even as fourth graders can advance to fifth grade without having to be retained based on their TCAP scores. One of the key pieces that we shared with our legislators over the last couple of years is our intervention structure. You guys have heard these terms. We give Tier 1 instruction, and we give Tier 2 and Tier 3 instruction based on how our screeners identify that extra help a student needs. We've done tutoring for years. That's improved. Our summer school program is actually a really good program. Students are getting that additional instruction during the month of June, so as Dr. Allen spoke to on Thursday night, they might have less summer slide because they are getting good instruction during the summer. So I'm encouraged about where we are with our state legislators. They are listening to us. That's one example. We had other examples through the past legislative session. It might not be on the timetable that we want every time, but our legislature is listening to us. Next month, we don't have a board meeting scheduled, but this coming Thursday is the County Commission's final vote on our budget, and we have some items on this agenda related to that. So with that, Corey Mason here, our Assistant Director for Communications, is here to speak about our celebrations.
That's right. Good morning, or good evening, I should say. We have an exciting round of student and staff spotlights this evening. We are going to begin, some of you may recall at last month's board meeting, Ms. Birdsong hinted that we have a number of perfect ACT students that we want to recognize. Well, we have more than a few. We have 27 students who have earned that honor, and we're going to recognize them tonight. We're going to begin with Brentwood High School and J.C. Zarnick. She earned a perfect 36 on her ACT. Cole Hawkins did as well. Rachel Hawes, Pranav Sathu, Joy Shurin, Colin Youngberg, Dennis DeGenero, and Andrew Gann all got that perfect ACT score. At Centennial High, Natalie Blank and Ryan Heidler also earned the perfect ACT. Franklin High School had Ava Bayer, Judy Sue, Finnegan Saylor, and Gabriel Palaconda, who got the perfect ACT. At Independence, Peyton Brandon, Elliot Lindsay, and Carter Marshall. And out east at Nolensville High School, we have Benjamin Hewitt, Samuel McCarthy, and Bryce Russell, and Emily Sherrill. At Ravenwood High School, we have Oluwashi Amason, Aiden Young, Sonia Kripalani, and Prithvi Patil. And at Summit High School, Caroline Constantine and Nathan Hoffman. We recently had the middle school track and field state championships, and we had several students who walked away with gold. One of them being Liv Garrett from Grassland Middle School. She won the girls 100-meter hurdles. Liv was also part of the track team that won the 4x400-meter relay at Grassland Middle School. Their coach, Mark Dickinson. At Spring Station Middle School, Lorelei Witten got the 1,600-meter run state championship. Her coach, Elizabeth Yancey. And Savannah Hack from Page Middle School won the girls' long jump. Her coach, Sean Carter. At the high school level, the Spring Fling Championships were held at the end of the school year, and our students did phenomenal. Brentwood came away with a lot of trophies. You see some of them there in that photo. We're going to begin with the Brentwood boys track team because they won the overall team ranking in Class 3A. Hudson Elaine, who was on that track team, he won not only the 400-meter dash state championship, also the 200-meter dash championship. Cannon Kinder won the competition in pole vault and decathlon. The team of Jackson White, Sam Bonner, Joseph Vaughn, and Hudson Elaine got the 4x200-meter relay. And Jackson White, Sam Bonner, Cameron High, and Hudson Elaine came away with the 4x400-meter relay. Daisy Oatsvall from Brentwood High School, she won the high jump state championship. And Lydia Cromwell won the 3,200-meter run. And last but not least, for track at Brentwood High School, Rachel Hawes, Lauren Banovac, Elise Truesdell, and Leah Banovac came away with the state championship for the 4x800-meter relay. All of those students from Brentwood High School, their coaches, Steve Brock and Michelle Doty. Let's talk tennis. The girls' tennis team at Brentwood High School, they came away with the state championship for the team tennis, and they are made up of Evelyn Risner, Maya Bell, Ilmsley Meir, Vivi Huddleston, and Audrey Yu. But not to be outdone, the boys' tennis team at Brentwood High School, they had their own state championship. They are made up of Stephen Smith, Evan Lai, Drew Miller, Austin Victory, and Andy Gann. The duo of Drew Miller and Stephen Smith came away with the championship for boys doubles at Brentwood High School. And Evelyn Risner won the girls singles state championship from Brentwood High. They are all coached by Kristen Young. At Fairview High School, going back to track, the team of Reese Larond, Andy Larond, Lauren Sloan, and Layla Curtin worked together to win the 4x800-meter relay. They are coached by Corey Phillips and Chris Smith. Claire Stegall at Nolensville High School, she just keeps winning year after year after year. She has more trophies to add to her case. She won the girls' 800-meter run and the 1,600-meter run. She is coached by Kyle Manderfield. And from Ravenwood High School, Donovan Starr won both the boys' high jump and the 100-meter dash in Class 3A. He is coached by Pete Mueller. So we started off with academics, then athletics, and we're going to finish with the arts because we have two educators in our staff spotlights who were named CMA Foundation Music Teachers of Excellence. The first one being Michael Holland. You see him here. He's the band director at Franklin High School. And joining him is Evan Burton, the band director at Page Middle School. Congratulations to all of this month's Student and Staff Spotlight Award winners.
Thank you so much. Lots to celebrate at the end of this year. Mr. Golden, any other comments?
No, ma'am. That is my report.
Okay, super. Thank you so much. Next item on the agenda is the board chair report, and the only thing I will echo from our work session is that this is our final meeting of the summer, but we do have one more set of board meetings, work session, and board meeting in August with this current sitting board. And then in September, your new board members will be sworn in. So definitely show up for the August meeting so we can have our final meeting together. Okay. Next on the agenda is new business. First item under new business is evaluation of the superintendent, which is an annual agenda item. Do we have a motion? Thank you, Mr. Wimberly, and a second by Mr. Welch. Okay, we'll open the floor for discussion. Mr. Welch?
I think just to repeat what I said or not last night, but at the work session. I think when you look at the totality of the review of the scores and where it came in, as a board, it was again exceeds expectations of the job, and I think it's fair to say the expectations of this particular job as superintendent of Williamson County Schools is high. It's higher than it would be at nearly any other district. So for myself at least, I just want to appreciate the hard work that you've done again, and look forward to having you continue to lead our district. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Welch. Mr. Cash?
Thank you, Madam Chair. You know, we had a great work session Thursday night. It was a lot of dialogue, a lot of discussions, and on the superintendent evaluation, I have never been real happy about this evaluation, this type of evaluation, and I've made that plain. And I think some of the other board members had concern about that. The weighting, 80%. Just on the strategic plan and whatnot, 20% on everything else. I think there can be a lot of work done on this to help out. And then I just wanted to say that I feel like Superintendent Golden has done a good job and everything, but I just, and I've talked to you about this before, I just feel like some decisions need to be made a little bit faster as far as school issues go, and I'm not going to go into detail. You already know all that. And that is why I said no on the extension this time around. But overall, I thank the staff, the teachers, the principals, and everyone for their dedication to the students and the hard work that's been done this year. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cash. Ms. Cleveland?
Yes, thank you. It's been a tough year, and for superintendent, you know, people need to realize he answers to 12 board members. He's got a staff that he's got to run. He's got to answer to the county commission, or not answer to, but work with the county commission. He's got to constituents, you know, the people, and work with the students. So it's a job I don't think I'll ever want. I think being on the school board's a lot easier. But Mr. Golden does check all the boxes to be an exceptional superintendent, and he goes beyond those expectations also. And I just want to reiterate again, and congratulations, that he did get recognized for being as the Mid-Cumberland Superintendent of the Year. So I congratulate you again on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Cleveland. Mr. Ha?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I was waiting to see if Mr. Wimberly was going to speak, but since he's not, I'll reiterate something that he pointed out on Thursday. I'm not complaining, mind you. But of the different elements and the opportunities to check the boxes, I believe, if my math is right, and I think this is what you were getting at, that out of 99 elements, 90 of them were graded collectively as meets or exceeds expectations, and I thought that was really good. I also want to give kudos to my fellow board members for some really thoughtful comments. I think this is one of the better collective evaluations I've seen, where it was apparent that everybody put a lot of thought into it. And Mr. Galbraith, I'll give you credit for putting into words something I wish I'd said too, where I really admire the ethical leadership of Mr. Golden. I think that we have a very straight shooter as a superintendent, and I think that your relations with the various stakeholders in the community is very well reflected in the comments and the evaluations, but the diplomacy and the courtesy that you extend to board members, county commissioners, all of our various stakeholders in the community is very commendable, and it's great to see this evaluation reflect that.
Thank you, Mr. Ha. Mr. Brown?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I was going to also say something about the comments, and it was kind of keyed off of something you said, Jason, at the work session, that you, I think I'm paraphrasing, but you pay more attention to the comments than you actually to the scores.
Yes.
So in light of that, I guess I'm putting you on the spot a little bit, but maybe give us your reaction to the comments, you know, maybe in a general sense, and are there some that you wanted to key in on? I think it'd be beneficial for us to hear, kind of have two-way feedback here.
Well,
and for the public to benefit from your thoughts about the evaluation too.
Sure. So I'll do briefly related to the numbers. it's on a 5-point scale, and meeting expectations is a 3. So that's part of the reason I don't pay a whole lot of attention to the scores. I pay attention to the comments, and I pay a lot of attention to the individual discussions that we have on a regular basis over the course of the year. As I don't know, I feel like this is human nature, but maybe it's just me and some blank segment of the population. I focus on the opportunities as opposed to the praise. So when I hear something related to communication, especially, I look back and say, can I do a better job of communicating with you? That's a big one for me. You all can only make decisions in a public setting. You all can only make decisions as a body. And so for me, it's a personal challenge to communicate with you as much as possible, and I feel like I've got room to grow there. And so if I hear something that, for example, a decision wasn't made quick enough, I think about communicating the processes we go through to make sure that you understand where we are on issues like that. So I feel like I can do a better job communicating with you as individuals. I suspect as long as I'm superintendent, I'm going to feel that way. And I know and am convinced that this is an excellent board. We talk about our student success regularly, and we know why we're here. We know why so many people moved into this community, and it's about our student success. Success is tenuous. So that's on my mind. When I see opportunities to grow just that little 1%, I want to do that. I do worry about those items that tend to be in conflict with each other from time to time. Trying to move quickly versus making sure all our stakeholders are involved in the decisions. And so that's a constant challenge. And so one commitment that I have internally, based on the comments that I've heard from you all this year, is I've made a commitment to myself that I'm going to share with you as individuals more. I'll give you one recent example. I talked to each one of you individually about budget issues last week. Talked to you somewhere between 15 and 30 minutes each, probably, right? And there's 11 of you. It's exhausting, but it was worth the conversations. And so I'm going to make sure that I do that more often, regardless of the issue.
I appreciate that, and I just echoing something Sheila said about having so many different sets of stakeholders. It's hard to manage that, and so, I certainly appreciate the job you've done and the way you handle yourself with integrity, and the way you're willing to be honest about the areas for improvement that we all have. So thank you.
Okay. If we do not have any further discussion, we can move to a vote, but welcome any last-minute comments from you, Mr. Golden.
Can I recommend approval on this?
You can recommend approval. All right, board members, let's cast our votes.
The vote is 11 yes, 0 no.
Thank you. Motion did pass to approve the evaluation of Superintendent Mr. Golden. Next item on the agenda is the approval of the 2024-25 revised budget. Mr. Golden?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I gave you some detail at the work session and, of course, in those individual conversations I mentioned just a second ago. We started the budget year knowing that absent help from the county commission, we could not actually do a 6% raise. We did get a little bit of help, a little bit in the great scheme of things in the aggregate, but it's over $1 million from the county. Our proposal to you is to find a way, to use every tool that we had available to find a way to get a pay increase for our faculty and staff without a property tax increase. And we did find that way, and we presented that to you. That's what's before you in this document. And it uses some help from the county commission, which is item 1 above, moving high school Chromebooks and technology from our operating budget to contingent capital. That's number 2. Number 3, and 4 actually, we made a commitment to the county commission that we would have a net zero staffing increase in our budget compared to last year. We project a moderate student increase of 0.49% this year. Again, that's projections. So you can see in paragraphs 3 and 4 the proposal to give a net zero. And then finally, to reduce the request amount in this budget for science textbooks, knowing that if the expense actually exceeds that, going back to the county commission to fund that through our fund balance. I want to mention a couple of key items related to budget that we talked about repeatedly, both at this level and at the county commission level. Number one, because of how we budget and how the county budgets, there are funds available. It's just a question of accessing them and how we can access them. Under the state rules, we have to start our budget with a 3% undesignated fund balance. And on the property tax level, we budget at 92% of property tax receipts. So the money that is not spent in a particular budget year rolls to help fund the next year's budget. So every time we do something like this, that issue becomes just a little bit tighter. So the next year is just that much more difficult. But I don't know that that's a bad thing when we're talking about tax money, being conservative with our tax funds. Second, that I want to mention is our board and our commission has been conservative in our spending, even in an environment where the state puts that additional burden on Williamson County, more so or very close to the same as the highest burdens in the state. Because of the structure of how the state funds us, we have what's called a fiscal capacity indicator, where if it is to be, it is up to us often with our budget. Even through that, from 2005 to today, just under 20 years, the Williamson County property tax rate has dropped from $2.84 for every $100 of value to $1.88 for every $100 value. In the last 19 years, the property tax rate has dropped by 96 cents. I'm not going to get into the details of how they're calculated. I invite you to look at your tax bill to figure out how they do that math. But I'm proud to live in an environment where we can be conservative and still find ways to succeed. And so thank you guys for your work. I am going to recommend approval, but there may be some discussion.
Yeah. Okay, well, thank you for that precursor. We do need to go ahead and get a motion to put this on the floor. So, Mr. Wimberly, thank you. And do we have a second? Thank you, Mr. Brown. It looks like Ms. Apria would like to offer some comments.
Thank you. I just wanted to say I'm going to vote to support this, but as was mentioned in the comments earlier, the public comments, I am a little bit frustrated with the fact that we're going to have to kick a lot of things down the road a bit, kick the can down the road, and pull from our own contingency capital funds and our fund balance for some of these expenses. I hope this conversation has kind of opened the door to us collaborating a bit more with the county commission, especially on the topic of the state funding that was eliminated and pulled back, where they found us more fiscally capable in this county to fund the schools. I know Rick Wimberly had brought a resolution in, I think it was 2022, back when the state was putting a lot of kind of red tape, undue burden on some of the responsibilities that teachers had and how we were having to fund them. And the resolution stated that we would have asked the state to take a look at those things to see if there were any that could be cut to make lives easier for teachers. And if we can work with the county to go to the state and advocate as a team to say, maybe there's some things we can look at cutting, some undue expenses, things like that, we can find a way to fund these things a little bit better. But just seeing I know you mentioned we only have a 0.49% growth in our county, but looking where I live in Nolensville, that's probably all majority from there and Spring Hill. So I just want to speak to the fact that when we pull from contingent capital funding and things like that, that is going to hurt our area kind of the most, because we really need a new school, and if not two. And those are things that are going to kind of come up again next year when we look at this. So I just wanted to mention it. I'm supporting it because I'm really relieved we didn't lose that 6% raise. I'm really relieved we didn't have to cut any positions. We're cutting positions that weren't already there. So there's going to be a pain point on that, but at least we're not, no one's losing their job. So that was it. But thank you for your work on this.
Thank you. Ms. Clements?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to thank Mr. Gold and Ms. Farmer for all the hard work that you guys put in and rolling up your sleeves on this. I feel like when we got down to the 555, I feel like we were so close. And then, we got some messages from teachers who were saying, we're excited about the 6% raise, but if we get a property tax too, they kind of cancel each other in some way. So I'm glad that y'all put in the hard work to really make it happen so that they can still get their 6% raise and no property tax increase. And so I just wanted to thank y'all for that. And I just want to say I'm going to be going to work to speak with my state delegation about, really kicking in some of that funding on the requirements that they put on us. So thank you. Thank you again.
Thank you. Mr. Galbraith?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I do want to I take to heart the comments that we've heard over the last couple of weeks or months, really, regarding the art supplements. I'll put forth an amendment if there's interest amongst you guys. Otherwise, I'll just leave it to my comments. But I think I just want to go on record to say that I believe we're making a mistake in not giving a bigger percentage raise to those on the lower end of the scale. I was willing to couple that with a smaller raise for the higher end of the scale, and just recognizing that with $16.8 million, we could have given everybody in the district a $3,000 raise. That would have been quite significant to those on the bottom end of the scale. It wouldn't have been as much to the top end of the scale, but it would have been the exact same amount for everybody. I think that would have actually been a more prudent way to do this. But in addition, on the art supplements, I'm still in favor, having received the numbers today, and maybe even Friday, some of them, we could increase all the art supplements by 20% for $250,000. I don't think I would be. We could pay. I mean, there's just a couple of the numbers. Half of the salary increase for those making over $120,000 would also be $250,000. But even I would not be in favor of doing that unless we were going to give, if we wanted to give the classified staff making less than $50,000 a year a 9% raise rather than a 6% raise, that would cost an extra $1.3 million. And we could do all of those things, and the teachers would all get a 5.5% raise. So, I get how it's frustrating to me how this could be somehow flipped and turned, that I would be advocating to cut the teacher pay when I've been advocating this entire time that I wish we wouldn't have been talking about putting a number on it, rather than putting a dollar amount on the total amount that would have been raised. If we would have done that this entire time, we could have accommodated everybody, and teachers getting a 5.5% raise would be quite happy with that. And yet somehow I have a feeling that it's going to be tough to get anybody to agree to reduce the amount of the increase of the teacher pay. But just know that it's completely possible. We can give the arts teachers a little bit more and bridge the gap and get them to get them an increase that I think they deserve. Honestly, I'm actually in favor as we move forward for next budget year to start earlier. I'm going to be talking about the annual agenda, and hopefully we'll put on the agenda some, all things around staffing and pay, and get those things, do a really more thorough dive into those in October and November of next year before we start the budget season, to give staff plenty of time to process and we look. But I'm in favor of not only these flat increases, but I want to pursue just kind of everything on the table. And Jason, is something that we've talked about in the past, but having some discretionary funds for the principals to be able to give to their best teachers. We want to make sure that we retain those, and rewarding those teachers who do an excellent job is one way to do that as well. I'm in favor of looking at all the supplements across the board and giving more money to those people who are pouring in extra over and above. And so there's several things that we can do. I regret that I can't, that I'm not going to be able to make that happen this time. But if anybody is interested and wants to pursue going down this road with me, I'm happy to go there. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Galbraith. Mr. Welch?
Thank you. Superintendent Golden, can you briefly summarize kind of what you talked about at Frank Talks today regarding the tax rate that we have in the county and sort of historically where it's been versus where it is today?
Sure, and I mentioned those 2 points in time. 2005, our property tax rate was at $2.84, and that's the countywide tax rate, and the schools take a portion of that. And it's currently at $1.88. So the basic structure in Tennessee for the property tax rate is that when there is a reappraisal, and that happens every few years, it actually is scheduled for next year here in Williamson County. In the aggregate, the county government is required to receive no more funds at the reappraisal than they received before the funds. In other words, the tax rate would drop to cover whatever increases in values happened through that window of time from one appraisal to the next. So that's a big reason why the property tax rate has gone down. The county commission defaults to that lower rate after an appraisal. That's the aggregate. But individual property tax bills might change based on the relative value of their home compared to somebody else in the county. So the most recent example was downtown Franklin. The property values increased substantially compared to some of the rural areas, and their tax bill went up substantially when some of the rural areas' tax bill went down. So that's the aggregate effect versus what happens to individuals. But for school purposes, it's the rate has gone down. As we have growth, more potential funds, more funds actually come into the county. As a farm becomes a neighborhood, there's more tax revenue. Likewise, there's an increased need for services because people move in. And so that's part of the structure of how things work. So the county commission has to make those decisions. On the county-state relationship side, the state has a structure where they set up a minimum amount of funding that's required for schools across the state. And they basically say the state's going to cover 70% of that and the counties cover 30% of that. By the way, that's a minimum. There might be one small school district in the state that does the minimum. For most everyone else, to be able to provide things like college and career technical teachers, AP classes, et cetera, you can't get by with a minimum. but that minimum is in the aggregate. And we're not responsible for anywhere near 30%. It's a substantially larger percentage. And Rachel, I'm trying to remember, I didn't mention this at the Frank talks, but our percentage is much higher than that 30% because of that fiscal capacity indicator. That may be too much information.
I think my comment next year is going to be on something around the definition of briefly. I say that in good humor and intention. That was actually very helpful. I think one of the big takeaways I was looking there was, in the past 19 years here, we've gone from $2.88 per hundred to $1.88. That's a 53% drop in the tax rate. And I don't like paying taxes. I prefer to keep my own money instead of having somebody else spend it. But, I'm not an anarchist either, and I realize we need something. And so when we start talking about these 6 cents and throwing up these numbers so it's the end of the world, I think it's important to put into some context. In the last 19 years, it's a 53% drop. It went from $2.88 to $1.88.
284.
I'm sorry, 284 to $1. It went down considerably. And as you said, the reason we've been able to do that is because property values have increased so much here. And one of the big reasons, I'm going to argue the primary reason for that increase in the property value increase, which I love, it's free money and equity in my home, is the value of this school system right here, as well as our neighboring Franklin Special School District partners as well. So this has been a very frustrating budget cycle, and I'm going to vote for it just because you and I have discussed it, and you've asked me to vote for it, and I've agreed that I would, because I think, quote former President Reagan, you fight like hell and get the best deal you can, declare victory, and move on. But it's frustrating because we got the 6% raise for the staff, and and I think all of our staff deserve it. I think our principals who are in those higher, I think they deserve 6% as well. But we've done it at potentially the cost. I know we're going to try and come back and get some of these things a bit later, but we're talking about laptops that have a 3-year life cycle that we've pushed to 5 years. We don't have the money in there. We have pushed them to 6 years. And anyone who has used an old computer at work that locks up or shuts down knows how difficult that can be to doing your job. And in this case, these laptops we're talking about having to be used on TCAP tests, which in some cases, a quarter of a student's semester grade. I believe it's that high in some cases. In other cases, we're talking about impact of having to take summer school and tutoring in order to advance. At the end of the day, it's just old computers that we're using. We're talking about whole high schools that can't have an admin. And so instead we're going to have to beg parents to, come in and do administrative, that or it's going to take away from administrators doing their job. So it's very frustrating, nonetheless. And it's frustrating, too. We got shortchanged $2.5 million this year from the state. And that's on our delegation. Our delegation, we've had our senator who put his priority on subsidizing private school for kids that are already in there instead of getting us the money we need for our existing students. And we had another representative who's suing us who didn't even bother showing up to our legislative meeting. Blew us off so he could attend a fundraiser. And the implications of that now are here, the butcher's bill is due, is that we're talking about things like old computers, not being able to hire computer science teachers for classes. We're not able to, we're completely robbing our fund balance and contingency plans. So when we do construction, and heaven forbid we hit rock or we hit a sinkhole, we're going to have to go back for more money. In that case, these are challenges. And we're going to have to raise that tax rate next year. We know that, so we can build the juvenile detention center, which is needed. But I can't help get over it that here we are talking about, well, we can't raise 6 cents now to educate these kids, but we know in a year from now we're going to have to raise it more so we can build a detention center for them. And so this just sort of sticks in my craw quite a bit, and I have to put this out there. But I will still vote for it at the end of the day, and I hope we can get some of those supplementary items funded a little bit later when the politics of the situation, which is driving it, subsides somewhat. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Brown?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm going to reiterate something I said Thursday night, and that is that the good news in all of this, if there's good news, is that everything save the position increases, the 10.5 positions, are things that we plan to fund, we're still going to fund. We're just going to fund it differently and maybe on a different time schedule. I think that's an important takeaway. I think there are plenty of issues with the way the budget process works. I've had that conversation with multiple county commissioners individually, that I think we can do better over the entire year in conversations with them about how we tackle some of these issues, how we look at their budget, our budget. And I think there's plenty of room for conversation there, but that's probably a conversation and a battle for another day. But something that Mr. Galbraith said and was made me think for a second about, can I ask, Madam Chair, for Mr. Galbraith to come back and recite the amount? I believe it was a number you cited for increasing the arts teachers supplement by a certain percentage, and the dollar amount I believe you said was $250,000. What was that percentage?
20%.
20%. Question for you, Jason, and I guess Rachel. Hypothetically, if we were to do that, what are the ways in which that could be done within the budget number that we're working off of tonight, in terms of shifting things around, or, I mean, I know it's not planned for in the current numbers that are calculated in front of us, but hypothetically, are there ways for what is, relatively speaking, a small amount of money that could be done? Or is that, at this stage of the game, impossible or nearly impossible to do?
So I'll give you my answer as the administrative leader, and then Rachel may be able to give you an answer from finance. At this stage, I think it's close to impossible because we'd have to pick out on the fly some piece. Another concern I have is what does this mean for potentially academic supplements? If we do an increased arts supplements, might that trigger another issue with academic supplements that might be similar? Another potential issue related to making a change now is we do have that responsibility to talk to the teacher team through the PECA process. And anytime we talk about pay for a position that requires a teacher. So because of those things, my advice to you all is, after this budget passes, let us look at it. I think it will touch on a few things. First of all, as a threshold, I like and agree with the basic principle that Mr. Galbraith is sharing about finding ways to meet those needs. Not in last year's budget, but in the previous two, we did make some substantial market adjustments that weren't just simply a blank percent. We increased classified employees' pay. We increased teacher pay, especially at those earliest career years. We did that after substantial research on market and comparing all the pay charts and having those conversations when appropriate with the WCEA leadership through that PECA process. So I gave you too much detail probably, but short version, I think this discussion deserves to be had in the next few months once the budget passes. I did make a comment that at least one commissioner tossed out the possibility that it may be that our sales tax projections might be a little conservative this year based on what might happen down the road. Might we have some more funding? It's a possibility. We made a commitment already with the teacher leaders to research that and have some discussions. And Rachel, you may figuratively kick me for it, but I think there's a possibility we may be able to come back fairly early in the budget year based on those discussions, making sure that we do right by all our folks.
Just to maybe dig a little deeper on that. So is there a way, the arrangement that we have through the PECA MOU, is that something that if, just for my clarity again, I think since we're talking about this later on in the agenda as well, is that something that we are bound by only when there's an agreement between the parties, or is it something that we can act upon after a conversation takes place, even if the action that we take might, in some instances, be different than what they would have agreed to?
That may be an attorney question, but I can speak in general. We have a responsibility annually to talk about pay, about benefits, and working conditions. Those are the three things that PECA requires of us. I have made a commitment to the teacher leaders to have a conversation before we make any recommended changes to pay, no matter what. Because our experience tells us every time you make a change, it might have an impact that you can't foresee unless you talk to your professionals. So it kind of gets back to what I talked about in more general terms regarding conversations with our stakeholders. I think the short answer is once we've talked, we could make a change. And we don't have that commitment until the MOU passes. But my practice has been honor them and have those discussions. The specific example I just gave is we do have academic supplements in addition to art supplements. Some of those extracurricular activities may have similar times and responsibilities that we ought to discuss.
But so technically speaking, not to beat a dead horse here, but technically speaking, if the conversation happens in good faith, which it should, and then a decision is made after the fact by this board that differs from that conversation, we are allowed to do that if it's the will of the board, even if it contradicts, even in a small way, the nature or the terms of the previous conversation, not the agreement, but the conversation.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Galbraith?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Josh made me look at something, and I think I will propose an amendment to the budget. I got to figure out exactly how to do this, Bobby. But I found a potential funding source for the arts. Well, I'm calling it the art supplement, but it's really all of the flat fee supplements under Section 5.3 of the MOU. So it's all the supplements except for the high school band director that's already at 17% and on par with our athletic supplements. And what I would like to do, and I'll present the wording in a second, but I just want to make sure the gap, Rachel, that you have on the negative $193,000 gap. That means we exceeded the funds that were due by $193,000. So my proposed amendment is to increase all of the flat fee supplements under Section 5.3 of the PECA MOU with funding in the amount of $193,296 and allow the CFO and superintendent to allocate those dollars as a percentage, as an equal percentage of those supplements prior to, I guess, as part of this budget. Does that make sense, Bobby?
it does. Are you going to have a liability? Where are they going to get the funds? It's got to still balance. Your budget's still got to balance, so
Well, it's balancing from, I mean, it's going to go into.
just one line item to another.
Well, right now, that 193 is going to be going to fund balance. Sure.
The only concern about doing that would be we still are going to have to, even though the board approves our budget and the commission approves the budget, the state still has to approve the budget. And I'm not exactly sure if we have zero available that they will approve the budget. I can't say that they won't, but that would be a concern for me, that if we truly zeroed that out and we had nothing less listed as undesignated fund balance, I don't know what the state will do.
Well, we've got our 3% as undesignated fund balance, right? So you're saying,
We're required to keep that balance, and so this would just be an addition. And like I said, I can't say that they won't approve it, but I don't know that they will.
so you're saying that they would approve 3% plus 3.02%, but they wouldn't approve 3.0%?
Again, I can't say that. I just wanted to throw that out, that could be.
Okay.
We still will have to go through the state as well.
That's fine. Well, I will take my chances that they'll allow us to have 3% rather than 3.02%
And
fund balance.
can I also say one other thing is we have not put pen to paper on that, so I don't know what the bottom line number would actually be.
Understood. Well, then I'll amend my amendment to say allocate the, allocate the excess funds over 3% fund balance. Then, and we can determine what the final number is after you get through putting the pen to paper.
Okay, so we just need a second to get this amendment on the floor. Thank you, Ms. Apria. We'll open the floor now to discussion around Mr. Galbraith's amendment, and I can read that if anybody, do you need me to read that, what that entails? Okay, so what Mr. Galbraith is proposing is to increase the flat fee supplements under section 5.3 by allowing Superintendent Golden and CFO Rachel Farmer to allocate excess funds over the 3% fund balance to fund these increases in the supplements.
If I may, Madam Chair, double check. I think Mr. Galbraith also included a percentage element to that motion.
No, I said
Oh.
specifically excluding the high school. That was the high school one is the only one that was the percentage.
Gotcha.
Okay, so we will open the floor now to discussion and questions if we need to clarify anything that Mr. Galbraith is proposing. Ms. Apria?
Thank you. Yeah, I had a couple of questions. I think you may have answered one of them just now when we're not talking about making this percent-based then, which is what the arts teachers are mostly asking for, is being the same as what the athletic supplements are. Second question, you pulled up, or you mentioned section 5.3. Can you do a double check that middle school drama is included in that? Because if that's the same category we looked at Thursday night, they were not included, and I think it's important that they are.
That is correct. Middle school drama is actually not in that list.
Okay, so for a couple of reasons, I even though I seconded, I did want to have the conversation and ask the questions, but I think it's important to follow the process and have the conversation with WCEA. I think they're very aware of this concern, and that it sounds like most of us are on board with making this equitable and getting those supplemental pays to the percentage-based way, but at risk of messing with the budget at the final hour and maybe unintentionally missing some folks that deserve the same increase, I won't support doing this right now, but I agree with what you're trying to do. Thanks.
Mr. Brown?
Thank you. And I guess I needed clarification too on, Jay started off with the $193,000 number, and then it's now more open-ended as anything over 3%. Is there a chance that, I guess this is for Rachel, is there a chance that over 3% could be more than $193,000, or do we need to go back to a fixed dollar amount?
As the budget passes, I mean, if it were to pass this week, that's the number we're looking at. But as we close out the year, yes, fund balance could change. It could go up, or it could actually go down a little bit.
I'm almost wondering whether it would need to be tied to whatever the beginning fund balance is ultimately.
And I will say too, we won't have that number until we actually close out June 30th, which will be most of the time we try to do it the third week of July. So we won't have an actual fund balance number until then.
Okay, I'll pause for now.
Okay. Mr. Wimberly?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Galbraith, I like what you're thinking, but I'm wondering, is there some reason that we're dealing with this tonight? Because isn't it true that what we are really going to the county commission with is a number, not a percentage? And don't we have the discretion to allocate that amount of money any way we want to? So I just wonder if this wouldn't be better to deal with after we get the budget approved, and perhaps we attach an amendment or a resolution that makes a commitment that we will look at this in another month or so, because we know that staff is working on conducting the study. We know that we need to get WCEA involved, and we know we want to do this. I just wonder if we would, I think we know we want to do it, but I just wonder if it wouldn't be better for us to tackle in our next board meeting, and maybe have a work session on it, because it wouldn't go into effect yet anyway, right?
Thank you for the question. I think about the go into effect, it would take the county commission ultimately voting for the budget for it to go into effect. I'm going to ask Rachel in a minute to address the question about the procedure with the county commission, but I will say I like this thought of what money we have available, given that it's probably low six figures, to initiate a discussion with the WCA about those supplements. I like that idea. I want to reemphasize that those unforeseen consequences that I've mentioned to you have some good examples here. Middle school drama is an example. Middle school choir aren't on this list, but I would want them to be on the table if we had some discussion. Likewise, academic supplements. So if I may make a commitment that we have a discussion to prepare for our next meeting, which is in August, see what we can do with the WCEA leadership, with a PECA team, and project out some estimate somewhere below $200,000 to say, if we had this, what could we do with it now as the school year starts at the August meeting? Short answer is, Mr. Wembley, I think your suggestion is wise, because I do worry about somebody who might get missed.
I mean, I wholeheartedly believe our arts teachers, et cetera, need to be paid better. That's just beyond me to think that anyone would think that's not true. But the truth is, everybody's underpaid. Everybody in the school system is underpaid, with no exception. And it seems to me that we need some help from the county commission and the public with their support to make this happen. But first, we got to get this budget approved, I think.
Thank you. Mr. Galbraith?
So, thank you. So, Jason, I'm pretty sure if we don't allocate this money, then we've got to go ask for it before we can spend it. So, so the only way for us truly to have this money at our disposal is to put it in the line item that we want it in. So, So we at least have to put it, we at least have to put this remainder, this 200,000, up to $200,000 of the remainder after applying the 3% fund balance. We have to put that into the supplement category, even if we weren't going to prescriptively tell how we were going to allocate it. So that's one way we could say that we were going to put it there, and then I could leave out the prescriptive nature of telling them how we're going to allocate it, and then we come up with the formula to allocate it after tonight. But then we don't have to ask the county commission again to move the money, like it's already there.
Either way, we do have to get, to your point, either way, we have to get county commission approval.
I don't think
Whether
so,
it's
no,
now
no.
or whether it's now, or either they approve our
They approve
budget
it
with
now.
that item in there.
Right.
Or an amendment. So
Right.
I'm going to ask Rachel about that.
So when we bring amendments back to you all, an amendment itself, sorry, if you can't hear, an amendment itself means that the expense is in this right major category and it is in a payroll line. And you can shift, or it's in a major category and in an operational line. You cannot transfer funds from an operational line to a payroll line, and you can't transfer funds between major category without the county commission approving. So the transfers we'll see like later tonight are all major category, within a major category and appropriate. So that's why they're an amendment for you, but an actual resolution would be required to move between major categories or from payroll to non-payroll.
So if I may, to that point, Ms. Farmer, given the discussion here, is there a number that, based on your professional judgment, given our budget as it sits right now, that could be appropriately placed in that line and still project out that we could get an approval from the state?
To be perfectly honest, this does make me exceptionally nervous because the only money we have, that 193, if fund balance again is projecting right now, comes back less than that, then I may not have 193, and then we've committed 193 in expense, and then I may not balance. So that is concerning for me. So no, sir, I do not necessarily have a number that I would feel comfortable with at this point.
Mr. Wimberly?
So are we saying that in order to do this, we would have to increase our budget request by whatever 200,000, whatever it is, over what we have on the floor now?
We would have to do that because it's coming from fund balance, but the expenditure is not in a line right now. So yes, we would ultimately have to increase the budget amount by that number, whatever the number may be. So where the total that we've given you for the budget, you would increase it by whatever number would be agreed upon to apply.
So in effect, we'd be going to county commission with a request for 200,000 more than they are anticipating.
Correct.
And it's probably true that the county commission has given us the number because they don't want a tax increase. Would taxes have to be increased to pay that $200,000?
Taxes would not have to be increased because it's in fund balance. And so it would not require a property tax increase, but it would require an increase to the actual budget amount.
I know the motion's still on the floor, the motion to amend. I have a suggestion, given the concerns that Ms. Farmer has shared. Why don't I let the commission know that the board's intent and discussion is that when those final numbers are actually come to fruition in mid-July, we intend to come to you with a request to use some of that undesignated fund balance in excess of 3% for this purpose, for supplements, and let them know it's going to come. That's another possibility. Because either it needs to be approved now, and I'm concerned about the risk of the budget based on what Ms. Farmer said, or it's got to be approved later based on numbers that actually come to fruition.
Mr. Brown, or Mr. Galbraith? Okay, Mr. Brown.
So it's a question for clarification, Rachel. When you say the budget has to be increased by that amount, the revenue side would not have to be increased, would it? But the expense side would.
Correct.
So we wouldn't be going back and asking for more revenue from the county. That's right.
Correct.
We would just be increasing our expense line by that amount, but still within the revenue that they have said they would approve.
Correct. They really, when they are our funding body, but they are also approving how much we can spend. That is what the actual resolution that they'll be voting on is, the expenditure side. And
But
so
we,
the-
sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
So we would have to increase by whatever the amount is over 548,617,028 is where we are currently recommending. So whatever you would want to add would have to be added to that total for them to vote on.
But again, not on the revenue side though, because they've said that all they're going to approve on the revenue side was the 548 and change.
Correct.
But the fund balance that we're proposing is within that 548, correct?
The excess fund balance, yes, is above the 548.
It's above the 548.
It is in
It's not
addition. So
within.
we're using fund balance to balance our budget. And then.
Last year's fund.
Yes. And so 193,000 is what's left over as an estimate. Again, we're estimating because we don't have the final numbers yet. That would be what was left over, and that is what you're suggesting that we commit to using towards the supplements. To do that, we would have to increase the supplement line as part of one of the expenditures. And so the expenditure would go up. It would not have an effect on the county commission and know anything that they are committing for us. They would just be giving us permission to spend an additional, whatever, $200,000 in our budget.
But the 3% fund balance that we're required to have is within the 548.
It is a fund balance is not an expenditure. Fund balance is more of, view it as a savings account. So no, that number is not included in the total expenditure line. It's on top of the expenditure line of what we have to have.
It's on the revenue side, but they're only giving us 548 in revenue, right?
They're giving, total revenue is 493, 509, 547 currently.
Let us give you a visual of your question. Tim, can you pull up the document that's right behind Rachel's memo in the board packet?
It's going to be a summary. It's got blue lines on it. It's the summary of the operations general purpose school fund budget.
And I'll refer you to the bottom of that document. Oh, we've got some good. He's going to increase the font or enlarge it.
So
Go to
come
the
down.
bottom. Good, there you go.
So our projected revenue is the 493. Our estimated fund balance is 71,759. That gives us total resources of 565. The expenditures that they have approved or have indicated through the budget committee and the resolution last week was 548,617,028. Then we have to have the 3% on top of that. So our total funding, so to speak, that we need is that 565,075. If you go back up, our total resources are 565,268. So that gives us that additional 193.
So if you would, go back to where you were. So I want to make, earlier this week, the County Commission Budget Committee recommended approval of expenses of 548,617,028. And then that 3% is undesignated. And Rachel, just to make sure I understand what you've been saying, that 193,296 is a gap. I'm gonna use my terminology. That is a fail-safe against estimates compared to actual that we won't really know until mid-July.
Correct.
If we approved this, though, where would that 193 go?
It would
once
be
it's zeroed
added to
out?
the 548,617.
So it would be in the expenses.
And then that's going to adjust that 3% just a little bit because the 3% is based off of the actual expenditure line, or the approved expenses.
But to be clear, the 548, 617, 028 is what the current property tax rate would support.
All revenue sources.
All revenue sources, including fund
Including that
balance.
property tax rate.
Yes.
Yes.
I think that's where the including fund balance is throwing me off, because it's included as a roll-up into the next year's number, but it's, when you start the year, it's added on to that number. Right, so the 71 million we're rolling over gets us to the 565, and then we're backing out the 16 million for fund balance.
That's right.
Correct.
So my other question on the middle school teachers or middle school arts question, the reason why those, if I think I heard you correctly last week, the reason why those were left out of the MOU is because they're not necessarily required to be performed by teachers?
That is correct.
So then they wouldn't, those positions wouldn't necessarily be subject to a discussion with WCEA?
Not necessarily, but all the arts positions, well, some of the arts positions do require that, and the academic positions as well. And I'm concerned about the relationship between those, that there's a possibility there may be some similar responsibilities, and I want to make sure that we have that discussion, because it could trigger a challenge with some of those positions that do include it.
Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Hall?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Golden, I think you've been pretty subtly informing us of the concerns of unintended consequences with this, and I appreciate that we are trying to dig under all the couch cushions here to come up with a need that is pronounced, but I also don't feel comfortable that you or staff have taken the opportunity to look at all of the needs and assess this as the highest priority that you need to address. And if I'm wrong about that, then let me know. But I think that what you've said, what I've heard you say, is that you haven't had the time to look at all aspects of this, consider all stakeholders, ensure that there would be nobody forgotten just because they haven't spoken up en masse about an issue. I would not want to slight anybody in the service of trying to do something good. And I appreciate that you would say that you'd made a commitment that you would talk to the county commission in July about this, but I also wouldn't want to get out over our skis if that doesn't give you enough time to do the due diligence that you would like to do to ensure that there are no unintended consequences of this. So I'm very supportive of equitable pay for our volunteer or folks who are volunteering their time to massive extents, and I applaud their efforts, and I want to make sure that we do this right and do something that is very thorough and well considered and has been given the appropriate analysis that it deserves. And I also heard our CFOs say the phrase exceptionally nervous. So I'm factoring that in heavily too in my decision. Thank you.
Mr. Galbraith?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I'm just going to, with Jen's approval, obviously, I think to make this more easier to swallow would be to essentially remove the detail about what you have to increase as far as the flat fees, and just allocate the remainder to a supplement to the supplement payroll major category, and then with the details to be approved in August after staff reviews and consults with WCEA. So that would give time for the middle school's positions to be added. You can figure out what the amounts need to be, and then we can just vote on how that's going to be allocated, presuming that the commission approves the the money. But given the fact that we've come, you know, $8.5 million or so towards the middle. I mean, I think $200,000 funding without a tax increase, I think would be sufficient for the. I don't presume to think that they're going to begrudge us the ability to do this for our people. So does that make sense? So basically allocating the excess over and above the 3% into supplements, and I'll just say up to $200,000. So if you have an excess, if the balance ends up being $300,000, then we're only allocating 200 to the supplements, and the other 100 will just go to fund balance. And if it's only 100, then 100 will go to fund balance. Will go to the supplements.
Okay.
That's all I have to say about that.
Thank you. Mr. Welch?
Thank you. So I think we've been doing it this 4 months now, and I'm very nervous that we're trying to change the budget in the last 20 minutes before we pass version 3.0 of this. Also, our CFO talking about concerns about the state not approving it. That's a huge red flag that I'm just not really want to casually roll the dice, and I think it's pretty clear that our superintendent is opposed to that as well. But let's put all that aside. Our theater teachers, I think, right here, universal agreement, yes, they need more money, and as Rick said, everybody needs more money, and I think, we need to get them that. But I think we need to look at it holistically as well. If you are comfortable, this is just the one position that needs it more than the others, and you're comfortable with your understanding of the supplements, and not just arts versus athletics, but let's sort of talk about the academic ones. And I pulled up our charts. As you go around the table, think to yourself, do you know what the supplement is for the library lead, or student council, or yearbook, or newspaper, or Model UN? Does everyone here know what the hours are on those, what the percentage is, what the dollar amount is? Or forensics or robotics, what is a department chair? What is their time commitment and number of hours that it costs? Does it vary by department? ACT testing coordinator? How's our tennis supplements? What are they currently at? Are they sufficient? Are they way behind? How does that stack up versus wrestling or flag football? And if we want to do the arts, well, what about chorus or jazz ensemble or strings? I'm not opposed to the ideas that have been brought up tonight, but this seems very haphazardly done, and I'm just really worried about any unintended consequences that come out of this, not the least of which is not getting our budget approved by the state and having to come back here for version 4.0. So I for those reasons, I'm not real pro, let's change up the budget here at the, not in the 11th hour, but, the 11th hour, 59th minute, and whatever seconds into it. This just does not seem a good way to sort of form our budget moving forward on that. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Apria?
Thank you. Just a quick clarifying question. If we do not pass this amendment right now, the 193,000 or whatever we discover to be left over once the books are closed mid to late July goes to our fund balance for next year. It
Yes.
still rolls over and we
That's
can
right.
figure out what to do with it. Okay, thanks. That's it.
Mr. Brown?
Just a quick comment, maybe as a thought for later, as we get further into the year, the new budget year, and you start to think about ways to do some of these things. I just would be really, as a general principle, concerned that we would ever take a position that just because we can't do something for everybody, that we would we wouldn't do anything for anybody. I think that's a really narrow way to look at it, because I think there's opportunities that we have to selectively try to boost certain things as we see them come along, and I would just be cautious that we not take an approach as we go into analyzing and thinking about this, that if we can't do it for anyone, we do it for no one. Just food for thought for later.
Thank you for that. The thought that has gone through my mind repeatedly over the course of years is kind of a contrapositive to that. If we can do something, we should, right? And so I do hold that thought. If there's no more comments, Madam Chair, let me speak to this just a little bit more. I want to repeat this. I like this idea, especially given this tight budget year, of finding a way to get what funds we have available to our staff. In this context, we're talking about really hitting that 3%, right at that 3%. I like it for a handful of reasons. One, it's because if we can do something, we should, or what Mr. Brown said. I also like it because I'm projecting out where we think we're going to be next year. We have science textbook adoption this year. We don't have a large textbook adoption scheduled from the state next year. We've had a substantial cost for Chromebooks. We've covered it with capital this time, and we may have some mitigating factors next year with our Chromebook schedule. We don't know how much is, because we're evaluating elementary schools and our need there. It's possible the total might be less, but then we do have to figure out where we fund that. So there's some differences. There will be some differences in next year's budget year. But I want to ask this question of Rachel before I'm prepared to make a recommendation related to this. When you've talked about mid-July, are you confident that we will actually know the for sure dollar value of fund balance before our August work session?
We will have a better estimate. What can also happen, however, is state auditors, they're currently in our offices now, and they will be with us through probably October. And they do come back from time to time with adjustments that we need to make, and sometimes that affects fund balance. And so while we will have a good estimate on our end, there actually could be adjustments made to this fiscal year through the auditing process that we will not know probably until October at the earliest.
We'll have a better idea, but not
But we will not
firm.
have the final numbers. Last year, they finished with us, and we got the audited numbers in November, but they were able to give us the report where they felt like it was going to be in October.
Okay. I think this brings us to a vote, Board. Does everybody, yeah, go ahead. Yeah, Superintendent recommendation.
I do not recommend approval of this, with a caveat that if this does not pass, I will let the county commission know that we intend to bring back to them in the fall a request for an amount to meet the 3% to cover additional supplements.
Okay.
If that makes sense.
Mr. Wimberly?
I think Mr. Galbraith said that he wanted to change the language of the amendment. So can we get the language as we're voting on it?
Yes, it is to increase the flat fee supplements under section 5.3 by allocating excess funds over 3% fund balance into the supplements up to $200,000. Okay. Board members, let's go ahead and cast our votes on this amendment.
I'm still thinking.
The vote is 5 yes, 6 no.
Thank you. Motion fails. No? 6. Oh, 1, 2, 3. Oh, so actually this passes because we only need 6.
5 yes. 5 yes. 6
1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, thank you. Yeah. Motion fails for this amendment, which brings us back to the original item on the agenda, which is the approval of the 2024-2025 revised budget. And so now we should get a motion on the, do we already have a motion for the? Okay. So now we can open floor for comments on the actual budget itself.
And if I may, before we start, Madam Chair, I am going to speak to the county commission this Thursday about what we just discussed and let them know that.
Okay, thank you. Okay, board members? If we don't have any further comments, we can go ahead and move to a vote on this. And I know, Mr. Wimberly, yes, you have a comment.
I do.
Thank you.
Again, for the last time, I, Rick Wimberly, have an immediate family member who is employed by Williamson County Schools who may be affected by this proposed budget resolution. My vote on this budget resolution is nevertheless in keeping with my oath of office to fulfill my responsibility as an elected Board of Education member. I say to you once again.
Thank you for the last time. Mr. Galbraith.
For the first time, I have Jay Galbraith, have an immediate family member who is now employed by Williamson County Schools who may be affected by this proposed budget resolution. My vote on this budget resolution is nevertheless in keeping with my oath of office to fulfill my responsibility as an elected Board of Education member.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Galbraith. Board members, we may now move to our votes.
The vote is 11 yes, 0 no.
Thank you. Motion did pass to approve the budget for the new school year, which brings us to the current school year. 2023-24 school board budget. First item for discussion is approval of general purpose school fund amendment for the IDEA grant in the amount of $25.20. Do we have Jason?
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is a carryover for a revenue side for the IDEA grant of $25.20. Do recommend approval.
Thank you. Do we have a motion?
Move to approve.
Okay, Mr. Wimberly, second by Ms. Clemens. Thank you. Any discussion? Okay, board members, let's cast our votes.
The vote is 11 yes, 0 no.
Thank you. Motion passed to approve the general purpose school fund amendment in the amount of $25.20 for the IDEA grant. Next item is the approval of the general purpose school fund amendment for summer learning camps grant in the amount of $10,079.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is a reclassification of our summer learning camp, summer school that is fully funded by the state. We're making this change at the state's request.
Okay, thank you. Do we have a motion? Ms. Clemens, in a second. Mr. Hall, thank you. We'll open the floor for discussion. No discussion. Board members, let's cast our votes.
The vote is 11 yes, 0 no.
Thank you. Motion passed to approve the general purpose school fund amendment for summer learning camps grant in the amount of $10,079. Next item is the approval of general purpose school fund paid parental leave reimbursement in the amount of $1 million.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The state now requires additional paid parental leave. We are projecting the cost for that to be $1 million. The state has told us that they will fund that so long as funds are available. So we do recommend moving this line item for that purpose.
Thank you. We have a motion from Mr. Cash. Do we have a second? Mr. Priya, thank you. Any discussion on this item? Okay, board members, let's cast our votes.
The vote is 11 yes, 0 no.
Thank you. Motion passed to approve the general purpose school fund amendment in the amount of $1 million for paid parental leave reimbursement. Next item is the approval of the Central Cafeteria Fund Amendment for commodities in the amount of $621,814.10.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is an annual reconciliation of commodities in the self-contained food service budget, which actually moves that number in both the revenue and expense categories. Do recommend approval for accounting purposes.
Okay, thank you. Do we have a motion? Ms. Apriya, and a second by Mr. Brown. Thank you. Any discussion on this item? All right, board members, let's cast our votes.
vote is 11 yes, 0 no.
Thank you. Motion passed to approve the Central Cafeteria Fund Amendment for commodities in the amount of $621,814.10. Next item is the approval of the General Purpose School Fund Intra-Category Adjustment and Amendment.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is our annual capital funds request that we bring to the County Commission. It's actually already been approved by you once and taken to the County Commission Budget Committee and Education Committee. This is actually the resolution for funding. I'm sorry. Oh, I'm
These are
sorry.
the
I was at the wrong
intercategory
one.
transfers first.
Oh, sorry. Intra-category transfers?
For General Purpose School
Gen-
Fund.
I'm just going to say I recommend approval.
Okay. Okay. Do we have a motion? Mr. Beasley, and a second by Ms. Clements. Thank you. Any discussion on this item? Okay. Board members, let's cast our votes.
The vote is 11 yes, 0 no.
Thank you. Motion passed to approve the General Purpose School Fund Intra-Category Adjustment and Amendment. Next item is the approval of the Central Cafeteria Fund Intra-Category Adjustment and Amendment.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The last one was intra-category transfers. I've explained this one already. I do recommend approval of this capital request to be taken to the County Commission.
Thank you. Do we have a motion? Ms. Apria, and a second? Mr. Cash, thank you. Any discussion on this item? Okay. Board members, please cast your vote.
The vote is 11 yes, 0 no.
Thank you. Motion passed to approve the Extended School Program Fund Intra-Category Adjustment and Amendment. Next item is the approval of capital resolution intent to fund in the amount of $13,155,596.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is, I'm sorry. I have a hand raised from.
You just approved cafeteria, you haven't approved the extended school yet. Extended school is the third one, so you had three, so you just did cafeteria, so you'll have to do it.
I see it across.
Madam Chair, I apologize. I created this challenge. I looked at the wrong line to start with.
Thank you. Let's go back to item 7, which is the approval of the Extended School Program Fund Intra-Category Adjustment and Amendment.
Thank you. That is the end-of-year inter-category adjustments to the self-contained extended school year program.
Easy for you to say. Okay. Thank you. Do we have a motion? Ms. Apria, and thank you, Mr. Brown, as the second. Now we can cast our votes for the Extended School Program Adjustment Amendment.
The vote is 11 yes, 0 no.
Thank you. Motion did pass to approve the Extended School Program Fund Inter-Category Adjustment and Amendment. Last item under budget for this year is the approval of the capital resolution intent to fund in the amount of $13,155,596.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Finally, this is the item that I was looking at for the annual capital that you have seen once the County Commission, Education, and Budget Committee have looked at, and we are now bringing to them in resolution form.
Okay, thank you. Do we have a motion? Ms. Apria, thank you. A second? Ms. Clements, thank you. Any discussion? Okay, board members, please cast your votes.
The vote is 11 yes, 0 no.
Thank you. Motion did pass to approve the capital fund, or capital resolution intent to fund in the amount of $13,155,596, which brings us to board policies for second reading. The item under this category is the library materials policy. Mr. Golden?
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is the proposed second reading for the library materials policy that has changes made pursuant to the new state law. It has been removed from our traditional practice of being on the consent agenda as second reading based on the detailed discussions we've had. Lisa Carson, our county attorney, is here. As you know, she's been walking through that with us as we've been working on putting together a policy to comply with both state law and federal law. She's available for any questions you have.
Thank you. Do we have a motion? Mr. Beasley, thank you, and Mr. Brown, thank you for the second. Any discussion on the library materials policy? Mr. Wimberly?
I really do appreciate the time and effort that and the discussion to draft this policy. But we already have a policy that ensures that our students are exposed to age-appropriate materials. Not only that, we have a practice that's been longstanding for years. And all a parent or a guardian has to do if they don't want their student exposed to some of our library or other materials is just ask. And we do have a policy and a process so that interested parties can request that a particular material be moved out of the library, although it's kind of beyond me why someone should want to remove materials for someone else's child. So I don't think this policy is necessary. It overreaches local control and it may be unconstitutional. So I'm a no vote on it.
Thank you. Mr. Welch?
Thank you. I don't think it's not only unnecessary because we have an existing policy, but I think it's inferior to the current policy that we have. And I don't mean that as a slight to everyone on the policy committee, everything that worked on it. Please don't take it that way. The work you've done here is appreciative and is appreciated, and you were given an impossible task to do on it. I think the library materials decision tree is excellent. Phenomenal work, and it gives a thought process with the ability to put some knowledge in it. But frankly, it conflicts with what we see in the policy itself, which I know is taken from the law, and there's nothing we can do about that. I'm very convinced that it's unconstitutional. I don't say that as a legal scholar, a member of the bar myself, but based upon the input we've received from 3 members of the county attorneys, as well as our own board attorney, as well as what I think, well, I don't want to put words in your mouth, Jason Gold, but I haven't seen you disagreeing with any of the input we have received from the other 4 lawyers that way. So to me, and as we're just sort of talking here, I just started jotting down some of the authors that, growing up, I just read and have since, that I look at this policy and it would pull their works out of the library if applied. And I'm not saying it will pull them out of there, but if we applied it the way it's written, it would pull out Hawthorne, Hemingway, Bradbury, Hosseini, Rice, Joyce, Shakespeare, Steinbeck, Dumas, Haley, Poe, Elroy. It would pull out the holy works of the world, the Holy Bible, the Torah, the Quran. There are sections in there that do not apply to these guidelines. Simple art history books we would have to pull out. So for these reasons, I'm just not going to vote for it. And anyone that does vote for it, I understand why, and I don't fault you at all for doing so. Again, we've been put in this awful challenge, but it's just voting my conscience. It's not something that I can put my name to or want to put my name to ban books. So I realize it's somewhat peeing into the wind on this, but I have to put it out just because it sits in my craw so much.
Thank you. Mr. Brown?
Thank you, Madam Chair. A few thoughts about this. One is, I don't really think it's a question of whether this policy is inferior or superior to the existing one. To me, it's an issue that the existing one is inadequate, given what has transpired in the state legislature and what we're required to do in response to that. And putting Ms. Carson on the spot, but if it's appropriate to ask her to come up, I have a question.
Yes.
Sorry, Lisa.
No worries. That's what I'm here for.
Can you remind us and remind the public that there's a part of this policy that recites verbatim, significant part of this policy that recites verbatim the state law?
Right.
And there's also a provision that you added into this policy that if those provisions of the state law are deemed unconstitutional at some point after July 1, that those provisions would be removed from our policy. Can you speak to that, please?
Sure. Basically, as I've said to the board before, state jurisprudence is very clear that as an elected body, you are required to presume constitutionality of state law. But there are, as has been pointed out, some concerns about how this statute might operate as applied. And so as a safeguard, the portions of the policy that quote that language that comes not from local discretion but from state law that may be constitutionally problematic specifically says if the law goes away mandating these provisions automatically drop out of the policy, so that your policy would only contain that for so long as the law required it.
So, in your opinion, is the policy we have today, if we didn't make these changes that we're proposing tonight, that we've been working through for a couple of months now, is our current policy adequate to do what this board needs to do to comply with the law?
I don't think if challenged it would be found to comply with state law as it currently, the current policy would not be found to comply with state law as it will exist as of July 1.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Carson. Ms. Cleveland?
Yes, I agree. I don't like the policy, but as Mr. Brown noted that this is something we have to comply with. But also, we also know that if there are books, we can't just make a general broad statement that, we're going to be challenged or, the number of books or whatever. But if we are challenged and there is a question that if the board doesn't feel goes along with the policy, we can always challenge it at that time and then bring it to the state, kind of drop it in their lap. Because and that's what I feel we should, the due process is, right now we have to follow the state law, but if there's a situation we get into that we don't feel that particular book should be removed, we can challenge the policy at that time and go to the state. So I'd approve this policy.
Thank you. Mr. Cash.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We've had discussion after discussion in policy about this, and it's been my understanding from the get-go that this is the state law. It says K through 12, nudity will not be in our classroom books or library books, and also magazines and other, paraphernalia. Our policy does not cover this stuff. The existing policy will not cover this. We're going back to square one if we do this. If this doesn't pass, you go back to square one. We did nothing about it then, and this is why we've got this policy. That's why it's so strict. It's because we really didn't ever think this was going to happen. Now, it's just like Ms. Cleveland just said. If we get overwhelmed with books, we can turn it over. We can turn it over to the state and say, hey, what do we do about this? There are books that, are going to need to stay in, that might have some of these articles or something to do with violence or nudity in the arts and whatnot. But this has got to pass, so we've got to do something. We don't have a policy. And I still suggest that to show good faith, I believe our librarians who have vetted these books are going to know which books to tag that are going to be a problem. And I think that should be the first thing we look at in the 10%. We don't have to change policy to do that, but that's going to keep coming up. If we don't do it and we don't start looking at this stuff, the general public's going to do it. We're going to get slammed. And I don't want to see that happen. So let's do the best we can to make this work. There's been a lot of work in it. We've got a pretty good decision tree here. where we can, walk through some of this stuff and, get some of the Hemingways and, the other authors that Eric talks about. We're going to keep those. We'll keep some of those. And if they have to make an amendment at the, legislature or do something, be it. We can put it in their laps. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Hall?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I didn't think to ask this on Thursday at the work session, but as a matter of process, if books are challenged and then we do go to the state, what do we need to do immediately? Do we leave the books in place or do we have to pull them?
My recommendation would be that if you were making a request to the state to interpret the statute as applied to particular books, that the books would remain in the library until you get some type of response from the state. There is a provision also that a person objecting to a book can go directly to the state as well if they don't believe that the board is acting quickly enough. But I think given First Amendment jurisprudence, if you are actually proactively going either to a court for a declaratory judgment or the state for a declaratory order about interpretation of the statute, it would be appropriate not to remove the books pending that process.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Beasley?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. My question was for Ms. Carson as well.
Okay.
Yeah. Sorry about that. I should have gave you a heads up. So with the current policy that we're about to vote on tonight, right, do you feel confident that you could defend the Williamson County Schools with this policy and keep us out of litigation?
No, not at all. and I've tried to be very candid about that and tried to give you the best advice I can, but I cannot advise you not to follow state law. You are obligated to do that. I've said before, I think the policy as written is constitutional. We've spent a lot of time trying to write it in a manner that's constitutional. But as you start to get challenges, how you respond to those challenges will impact whether or not I'm able to successfully defend. Because if decisions are made to pick and choose based on whether you like the message in the book, then that becomes extremely problematic. And so what this state law that is so broad does is it actually puts you in the untenable position of you're probably safer if you remove more books. I'm not encouraging you to do that. As you know, what I've encouraged you to do is ask for a declaratory order when you get confronted with the concern. But it is an extremely precarious position, and I think you'll have to, and it's yet to be seen whether you'll have a flood. With the first passage of this act in 2022, I think we thought there was going to be a flood, and there were 5. So the floodgates may open, or you may have just a few, and they may be ones that you can deal with reasonably. But that's going to depend on what happens and then what your reaction to it is. As I said the other night at the work session, there's no First Amendment right to have an art book with nudity in it in a school library. But if you were to begin to remove art books that depicted certain types of indigenous persons, for example, and not a picture of the Statue of David, then suddenly you're looking at something that could very easily open itself into a First Amendment challenge. So no, I'm not confident at all. I'm doing the absolute best I can. Am I confident that this policy complies with state law? Absolutely. And am I confident that we have written it the best we can to comply with the Constitution? Yes. But I can't tell you it's bulletproof because it just simply isn't.
Okay, thank you so much.
It's going to require us to proceed very carefully.
Thank you. Okay. Board members, if we have no further comment, we'll ask Jason for his final recommendation.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Because this policy is written to comply with state law and it's best calculated to comply with federal law, I do recommend approval.
Thank you. Board members, let's please cast our votes.
The vote is 8 yes, 3 no.
Thank you. Motion did pass to approve the library policies for second reading. The library materials policy for second reading. And the next item on our agenda is the approval of the differentiated pay plan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The state requires a differentiated pay plan report submitted to them annually, voted on by the board. That includes differentiated pay that as an example, includes our hard-to-fill positions. That document is in your board packet. I do recommend approval of that to report that to the state.
Okay, thank you. Do we have a motion? Mr. Welch, thank you. And a second by Ms. Clements, thank you. Any discussion on this item? Okay, board members, let's please cast our votes.
The vote is 11 yes, 0 no.
Thank you. Motion passed to approve the differentiated pay plan. And the last item on the agenda is the approval of the PECA Memorandum of Understanding.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Annually, our PECA team meets, Professional Educators Collaborative Conferencing Act team meets with teacher leaders selected by our teachers through a formal state process. We have the proposed revisions for 2024, including a memorandum from Dr. Lee Webb that includes a screenshot of a portion of the supplements section 5.3, which actually we had some discussion on earlier. Do recommend approval of the proposed changes, again with a caveat that I will be letting the county commission know that we intend to bring something to them later on regarding that difference in the 3% fund balance in our proposed budget.
Thank you. Do we have a motion? Ms. Clements, thank you. Mr. Welch for a second. Any discussion on this item? Mr. Brown?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Jason, can you talk about whether, just big picture, whether there are any meaningful differences between our agreement in Williamson County Schools and, say, other districts in the state in terms of how they approach this process or how the kinds of things that get included? I mean, I know there's the three basic things we have to talk about, which you've cited, but how do we compare in terms of our process and our content as far as you know?
Well, number one, most school districts don't actually have an MOU. It requires an election process from the teachers to select it, and I'm trying to remember off the top of my head. I think it's 15% of the eligible teachers must say they want it. I may be off a little bit on that percentage, and then they select which entity represents them, and different seats can be at the table. Most school systems end up not reaching those thresholds. From a comparison to those that do, I don't really have a firm grasp of that because there's so few, but I can tell you grievance procedure as an example, which is Article 4, has been something that we've spoke to in detail about over the years, making sure that we maintain the flexibility of making employment decisions while still honoring this agreement. That's one that jumps out at me. That's one that's had a lot of that at least before the terminology and the language of it stood the test of time. We had a lot of discussion on, which is maybe a little bit different from what I've seen. Beyond that, I can't speak to any other comparisons.
Thank you. Mr. Galbraith?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I guess just in light of the discussion on pay, I guess I'm just a little disappointed on this on the MOU being brought up after the plea by the arts teachers and all the students, and you've got a board who's overall willing to make the adjustments, albeit not at the last minute. I totally get that, but I'm just a little disappointed that they didn't, and I guess in collaboration with, this isn't just a WCA thing, but just with the combination between WCA and the administration who's collaborating with them, couldn't couldn't find a way to bridge the gap a little bit better in this document. So, I mean, it's been like this for, obviously for years. Shame on me for not seeing it until people brought it to our attention, but that's kind of what we do. People bring up things. We decide if they're worthy to be changed, and we kind of make moves in meaningful directions. And so, I guess between this and the fact that I've never really thought a whole lot about it before, but it was just very apparent during this budget cycle, with the fact that the WCA doesn't really speak for all employees, particularly the classified staff. It's just apparent that the WCA, serves its purpose for its members, and ultimately, negotiates this memorandum for pay for all professional staff. But we just need, I guess I'm recognizing that we need to be more aware of as a board what's going on at the pay level, and so I look forward to doing that again. But I'm just really disappointed that they, in light of all the feedback that we and they received, that there wasn't more that was being proposed here. But that's it.
Thank you for that. I do want to make sure that I'm clear that based on all the information I had, our arts central office staff, working with Dr. Webb and Dr. David Allen, initiated questions of our staff to start gathering information for supplements. The prompts we gave prompted some of the discussion that ultimately you all heard just a few months ago in our board meetings. We solicited information from our teachers about how their work was in the supplement, in these supplements, asked questions related to how much time are you spending, how many productions are you doing on an annual basis to start that study. What you got was a request, let's make a change. That was, again, the result of our arts leaders saying, I think we need to make a change. Let's start gathering information to make a change. We have that commitment, and we're going to be doing that. And time, it's obviously not going to be on everyone's timeline, but it is going to be done as close as we can to the right way, to make sure that we honor everyone and protect all those nuances that may be out there with pay. But thank you for sharing that.
Mr. Brown?
Thank you. I'm sorry, I just have one more question. I was reading this document and thinking back to my earlier comments about if the board going forward after this is agreed to decides to do something different. Can you speak to, maybe this is a question for you, Jason or Bobby, what section 2.1 effectively means? I think I know what it means, but I want to make sure I'm not misreading it as far as the position the board is in relative to the WCEA in terms of the provisions of the agreement or any other actions we may take.
The language that the participants in PECA recognize that all rights which are vested in the board except those which are clearly and expressly relinquished by the board. There are some additional procedural rights that are given in this MOU that aren't in state law. The grievance procedure is one example of those. I think there may be some value in us as we prepare, making sure you all have a clear understanding of all those.
I think it would be helpful because I think we go through this exercise every year and we kind of just, breeze over some of this, but I think it's worth digging in a little more, especially when you see language like except those that are relinquished,
Yeah.
these rights shall continue to be vested in and exercised exclusively by the board without prior notice to the association or the participants in PECA, either as to the taking of action under such rights or with respect to the consequence of such action. Am I misreading that, just that it says we can take an action without their knowledge or approval? What does that really fundamentally mean?
The way I'm reading it is basically if you're not, those excluded rights, specific excluded rights, we cannot. The board cannot take any action without their approval or without their say-so. If it's one of those rights that is not, then I do believe, based on this language, you would be able to vote on something that you didn't need to go for their approval.
Okay.
But it would have to be outside of those excluded rights.
And by something that we've relinquished, it means something that we've agreed to further into the document, right, into the MOU, something that we've spelled out as a part of the agreement.
That's right, that's the way I read that.
Okay.
In prior notice,
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Thank you. If no further comments, we are ready to move to a vote, as long as we have Mr. Golden's approval.
Madam Chair, if I may make one final comment, this MOU is a 2022 through 2025 document. It's approved every 3 years with modifications within the content in those mid-years. Next year is the new 3-year one. Did I explain that well? It's a 3-year document. 2025 is the beginning of the next 3-year period, next year. Correct. That's right.
Ms. Apriya? Did you?
Thanks. I just wanted to ask a clarifying question about the high school drama supplement going to 5,000. On Thursday's work session, that one was highlighted as being a change, right? But that's actually, isn't that the same as what they've had previously?
Thank you for that. Actually, Dr. Webb let me know, and that question came up over the weekend. That change was not in the MOU, but that pay actually started last year. So there was a missed change in last year. So I misstated that. I thought there was a change for this year. We're 1 year in arrears on that.
Hey, Mr. Cash?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just one quick question. Jason, PECA and WCEA are two different memorandum of agreement, right?
Well, kind of. PECA is the state law governing negotiations or discussions with teacher groups. The teachers, through the process established in PECA, selected WCEA to represent them.
And what percentage of teachers have selected WCEA?
I don't know that off the top of my head.
Okay, that's all right.
We can pull back our records from 2 years ago and let you all know.
Yeah, I remember that coming up. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, thank you, board members. Let's go ahead and move to a vote.
The vote is 10 yes, 1 no.
Thank you. Motion passed to approve the PECA Memorandum of Understanding. That was our last agenda item, so we are now adjourned. Thank you.
Have a good summer.
Thank you.